if we want to be honest with ourselves, I think we have to bring AGP out into the light. And I also think that when we do that, it'll probably be less scary than people think it is. AGP, people think of it as like being hard at work. And that is like not usually
hard at work.
what it's like.
Look, if you're working here, you need to be
a whole new
work.
meaning.
You need to be super hard. Yeah.
No, not that.
So, in a completely different topic, I wanted to ask you about AGP, because I know you've talked about this before.
AGP.
I know nothing about this. Adam brings it up constantly, but he doesn't know enough about it.
What do you mean? I don't bring it up constantly.
Bring it up.
Who's the guy? Maybe she knows about the guy.
Blanchard?
Yeah, Blanchard.
Yeah,
Look,
she knows.
I've
heard her talk about it.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking her about it.
Is Blanchard
I didn't just randomly ask her about it.
No, yeah. I mean, like, I would say that I'm AGP.
What does that mean?
Basically, AGP it stands for, or it means autogynephilia, which is self-gyna woman philia arousal, the arousal at oneself as a woman. And it's a theory of like erotic target location error. This idea that like, if you are a heterosexual male, there's a way that you can develop such that your desire for other people gets like inverted and turned on to yourself. And then like you desire to like become what you love. And Blanchard's theory was that this is a motivating factor for some people to transition. I think that specific phrasing is key because it's not the whole factor, right? But it is a motivating factor.
Is it like men will often get turned on by cleavage? Is it like that same kind of turned on, like sexual attraction?
If you like see your own cleavage, yeah. But here's the thing.
Interesting. Because I don't think women feel that. When women look at their own cleavage, I don't think they feel.
Well, here's the thing. You can give surveys to cis women for AGP traits, right? And it'll be things like, so you give a survey to cis women and it's questions like, are you aroused by the thought of wearing like women's lingerie? Or when you imagine yourself having sex, do you imagine yourself as a woman? Things like that, right? Perhaps you're already seeing like some issues with this, but you give those surveys to cis women and it turns out that they score highly on AGP. So it looks like cis women also have a lot of these feelings. However,
it doesn't really seem like a debunk though. That'd be expected, wouldn't it be?
Yeah, that claim is like a little bit more nuanced because like some of the questions don't really make sense when you give them to cis women.
Yeah, that last one didn't make much sense. It's
exactly.
Like, do you feel aroused as a woman? Well, I mean,
it's like,
are a woman,
of course, right?
Yeah. Right.
So that's not actually unusual. And to some degree, there's like probably some sense in which some level of self-arousal is like normal for humans of any gender. But AGP is like a little bit more than that. And I think where the AGP conversation has currently evolved to is to think of AGP less as like a fetish or a paraphilia. It is paraphilia, but like less like a fetish in the sense that someone might be aroused by feet or giant women or something like that.
Can we talk a second about fetish? Because I'm confused by the term fetish quite often because like if you're attracted to say feet, what exactly makes that a fetish? Like maybe you just get a wife with super hot feet and you're like happy for the rest of your life. Like,
we just found out Adam has a foot fetish.
Well, no, I don't like, people are sexually attracted to different things. You know, some guys
that's
like
all,
boobs,
but that's all,
some guys
that's all
like,
it means. Fetish just means you have a strong attraction to a non-sexual.
Yeah, but why?
Well, it's
fetish,
abnormal.
Yeah,
so.
fetish.
Well, yes, obviously, right.
Strong. Yeah, fetish implies that it's abnormal, but I just I don't.
No.
I don't understand why it's abnormal.
TAF means abnormal in terms of, like, if you like feet, and you just when you have sex with your wife, you touch her feet or you fuck her feet or whatever. That's fine. But if it like motivates your actual behavior out in the world, like you're Coomer brained, you're motivated so much that it affects your daily life. That's an abnormal attraction to feet.
Yeah. So this is important because there is some nondescript line there. So you could be a guy who likes feet, has a wife with awesome feet. You marry her, you're together for the rest of your life. Every time she takes her shoes off, you're like rock hard, okay? But you're not out in the streets like, measuring women's feet. Like,
Yeah.
so where is the line?
Yeah, no, I think it's really good that you're hitting on this, because this is an important element of the fetish discussion.
Adam
and specifically
really wants to make clear that he doesn't have the bad version of the foot fetish.
Well,
yeah.
Look,
well, like, okay.
I'm just using feet as an example. Like I
sure.
No,
look,
yeah, Adam.
when
Adam,
most women
Right.
take their shoes off, I run. Like I'm not into
He
feet
runs
at all.
right to that shit.
Yeah. He runs, drops to his knees.
I'm just
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there is this line, which is like, how destructive or dangerous is
Yes.
the impulse, right? And there's going to be some things that are like sort of on the border. And what I would actually say with AGP is that, like, in a lot of ways, I think the way that people experience it is less destructive than like the fetish terminology would imply. And so, like, one of the ways that manifests, I think, is that for a lot of people who have AGP and who transition, the AGP feelings are really only active at the beginning of the transition. And so you'll hear a lot of trans women.
So it goes away. Wow.
Yeah. So like you'll see a lot of posts on the internet where people are like, I put on a skirt for the first time and I got like a raging boner. And then all the comments are like, that's normal early in transition. We call it gender euphoria, which is, they don't want to say AGP. That's what they mean.
That's what gender
but it's
euphoria is?
Sometimes, yeah. They're like euphoria boners they'll talk about.
Hilarious.
It's AGP that they're referencing, but they don't want to say AGP. Anyways, but that actually goes away really quickly. And it goes away in a pattern that follows the typical way that love affairs move from like a passionate sexual phase of love to a more companion form of love. And so when you talk to people who have AGP, I think their experience with it is like this intense passion, particularly like when they're younger or when they haven't transitioned. And then a few years into transitioning, it is more similar to like the continual love of like a companion, which is a lot less sexual and dangerous and fetishy than other paraphilias are. And so I think that like what we need to have are conversations about AGP that are honest, because more people then can really like destigmatize it, and we can actually get to the bottom of what's happening here, which I think is less scary than what people imagine, because they imagine like, cross-dressing like murderers or something. Or they imagine just like someone going out into public and like being like hard the whole time, or, things like that. I think that is not the case. In fact, generally the case is like this more lower level feeling of like contentment or peace or connection, in the same way that you might have if you were like out with your partner. You're not aroused every time you go to dinner with your wife, but you feel happy that she's there and you feel comfortable with that. And I think that is more analogous to how AGP feels.
Well, I just want to say on the like the gender critical people always talk about AGP being this thing that people with AGP don't want to talk about because it somehow like lessens the excitement. Can you address that? It seems like you're open to talking about it.
I'm not sure what you mean by
I
lessens the excitement.
I think I understand what's happening here, which is that, and I could be wrong, but I thought when Ray Blanchard kind of first came up with his typology, he was proposing AGP as an alternative to gender dysphoria. And so I think that's where the controversy comes from, was essentially saying, oh, these people don't have gender dysphoria, they just have AGP, which would be very controversial because gender dysphoria is the reason for transitioning that we give medically.
Maybe he said that like initially, but I know that Blanchard has his current position and his position that he's had for a while is that AGPs often have dysphoria and have medical need for transition. So like he's a big supporter of transition and of the medical need for it. And that's why
I read a lot of these books on the gender from the gender critical perspective, and they make an argument that people with AGP don't want to talk about this AGP stuff. They want to pretend like it doesn't exist because somehow it lessens the effect. And that argument always seems bizarre to me. It's funny
Oh,
that
you mean lessens the effect of feeling good about transition?
yeah,
Right.
the sexual kick of I don't know, like it's weird because I don't I don't want to offend people.
Right.
The I think some people I'm not super offended by the idea like if you're turned on by imagining yourself as a woman and you transition and you go to work turned on all day long. That doesn't offend me. Like
Okay, that is
like
kind of weird though. Like you probably should not be bringing your I mean,
well no this is the AGP
Adam
some
secretly wears a dog collar under his
look
shirt.
if you
whenever-
can
but
go
here's
to
what I'm
look
saying. I
if you
think the
can go to
AGP
work
is
and feel
not
turned
like
on all
that,
day
though.
knock yourself out. I'm like but the but this is that's what I'm like okay you're saying it's not like that. They're saying that it is like that and they don't want to talk about it because it lessens the effect of that, which I think is a kind of a crazy argument. But I've heard it
Yeah.
in like multiple different books, and I just as a team truth seeker here, that argument strikes me as a little just odd, and I don't know if it's true or not. That's why I'm asking.
Well, I'd be curious to know how they came to that conclusion
Mm-hmm.
because I think for most sexual interests, like feet or something, the reason why people don't want to discuss like their foot fetish in public is not so much that like discussing their foot fetish would make them no longer interested in feet, but that it's just sort of awkward and
Embarrassing. Yeah,
uncomfortable.
no, that's what I think. But I just, they make some argument that talking about the foot fetish makes it not as exciting. And I think that seems just ridiculous to me.
I mean, that might be true for like some people. Like I could imagine someone who there's like people who are interested in public sex,
Hmm.
and that's their fetish, or and like part of that might be not wanting to get caught with their interest. That's like arousing to them is the fact that they're like,
That I get. Like, I
right,
think anybody gets that. But to say that the effect of is going to be lessened if somebody finds out just seems ridiculous.
right. I'm not exactly sure how that would work, especially if like the
Mhm.
discussion and the act are separated temporally.
Hmm.
But yeah, my sense is that like AGP, people think of it as like being hard at work. And that is like not
Hard
usually
at
what it's
work.
like.
Look, if you're
Yeah.
working here, you need to be
A
hard
whole
at
new
work.
meaning.
You need to
for hard at
be
work,
you need to be
yes.
super hard. Yeah.
No, not that. You need to be working hard.
Well, also, I think part of the hesitancy to it too is that there's sort of the negative stereotype that all LGBT people are like deviant sexual perverts, and so that kind of I feel like a lot of people feel like the AGP label could lay into that stereotype, which is maybe why there's a lot of pushback.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I think that like people don't want to be perceived as like solely fetishists, or they don't want to be perceived as having like sexuality being the primary motivating factor.
Right.
And I think that like at least for me and a lot of the other AGP people that I talk to, it is not the primary motivating factor. It is
Right.
just a component. And I think being honest with ourselves about that is also good because, I mean, like you can acknowledge that sometimes sexuality is a motivating factor. Um, and by acknowledging that, you put it in its proper place. You can define a border around it rather
Mhm.
than pretending that it's not there and letting people like invent the borders of it, whether or not they believe that it's the whole factor or not. That's probably not the world that you want to exist in. And in fact, I found that when I was like less honest with myself about my own autogynephilia, my sexuality was like a lot stranger, a lot more bizarre. I had like more bizarre interests. And they were just like sort of, I was like trying to find something to fulfill myself. Um, that wasn't like what I was actually interested in, or that was like avoiding this part of my sexuality. And that's probably not like a very healthy place to be sexuality wise. So I think that if we want ourselves to be in a good place mentally, socially, if we want to be honest with ourselves, I think we have to bring AGP out into the light. And I also think that when we do that, it'll probably be less scary than people think it is.
Yeah, I mean, whenever I don't know who, but for some reason, whenever we have these conversations about gender dysphoria, because I'm I'm a pretty big true scum.
Mhm.
I think that I think that it's a medical condition.
That
And I
sounds
think
so
people
bad.
I know. I'm a trans medicalist. I think people should have to have gender dysphoria to transition. And whenever I talk about this, I don't know why people always throw AGP at me like it's some alternative to gender dysphoria, which is like
Yeah.
if it's not presented that way, if it's just like, yeah, people have AGB and that's fine. I mean, who cares? Like that's irrelevant to me. If you have gender dysphoria and you transition and you have AGP on top of that, like to me, it doesn't, who cares? That's something that it shouldn't really be a negative thing for people to talk about or perceive. And I think it's only because it's sort of couched in that alternative, way that it gets kind of the bad rap that it does.
Yeah, I think so too.
strange that like, so gender dysphoria is kind of the negative motivation, and AGP is kind of the positive motivation, but they're both motivations.
Sure.
Yeah. And so, like, Blanchard's typology, there's another half to it, which is the homosexual transsexuals.
Hmm.
Hmm.
But Blanchard's like main insight was that you need like multiple motivations to get you to transition, at least for like most people, right? And so you can have like the AGP motivation, the gender dysphoria motivation, the homosexual transsexual motivation. And his idea was that these are like um they're incompatible with each other. And my like own personal theory is that they're probably not incompatible, at least not homosexual and AGP, homosexual, transsexual, and AGP. Like it seems totally plausible to me. You could also have a bisexual trans woman who like does not want to be perceived as a gay man and doesn't want to be like feel that, homosexual persecution. And therefore that is also a motivating factor in her transition.
Hmm.
So I know that there's like some sexologists who have done like big surveys of trans people, and they've like thrown up like all the like the cluster cloud of bullet points. And I think that like you can find in that cloud like groups of people who are like AGP primarily, homosexual, transsexual primarily, but there are like people on the edge of these clouds. And I wonder if that is the result of people kind of having motivations from both factors.
Yeah,
So that's
maybe.
that's that's my personal pet theory. It's
Well,
not
I always
proven or
get tripped
anything,
up
but
by the I get tripped up by the homosexual because,
Yeah, I was gonna.
well, is that what you're gonna say, Sitch? Because I just like, is it? I mean, I never know if
Well, I
we're
was gonna
going
ask you
with
too, because
homosexual
I was gonna say
pre or post transition.
right.
So
Well, I was gonna say well, first, no, I was gonna say that like the idea that it's these a bunch of different factors coming together is probably true. I mean, it seems to be true for most things in life.
Blanchard says
Um,
AGP
right.
is
But
only affects biological males, and usually they are attracted to women.
right.
yeah, always,
But
yeah.
but I was gonna say regarding the homosexual
Or yeah,
transsexual
they might be
thing,
asexual, but yeah.
right? The I was gonna ask you to explain what that is because me and Adam had a big fight about that. So I
we
want to make
we
sure
fight
we're
all the
defining
time,
it the
so it's
same
not
way.
like
Yeah, I know less about homosexual transsexuals.
Hmm.
So if I get like caveat, I might get things wrong. But my understanding of it is that the original theory is that some people transition to escape homophobia. And these
Right.
people are attracted to men. They are hyper feminine. So, in the way that like gay men are feminine, they're like that, but more. And so they might also have dysphoria as well. And these people, they decide that it's easier to live their lives as a woman than as a man because they're already so feminine. And so they
Hmm.
just like make the jump. And there's like some interesting facts about that like for example, Blanchard in his surveys, he came to the conclusion that homosexual transsexuals are less likely to pursue sex reassignment surgery. So these homosexual males who are attracted to men but transition to women don't have the same sort of impulses as AGPs to really radically change their body. It is
Mm.
more like a means of convenience to
Right.
escape oppression.
Because so yeah, because that was my understanding of it, and I think that he also believed he kind of was talking about how like there's argument that effeminate men were like the least desirable in the gay community
Mm,
in terms of sex partners,
Sitch,
right.
and And we kind of, we argued about whether this was true or not. And we had our resident Sitch and Adam gay weigh in and tell us that this is not the case.
Someone in the comments though said that
Yeah.
For some gay guys, having
Mhm.
sex with heterosexual men is like a giant kink.
I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
I'm sure it is. But I guess what I was going to ask about this was, I mean, I don't. And also another thing that I think when Ray Blanchard came up with this idea, it was like in the 1970s when obviously feelings about gay people were very different. I think a lot of his research was in like South or Central America. And I could like believe that culturally there could be situations where gay people feel that they'll have a better life transitioning, and that's the motivating factor. But I'm very skeptical that in the year 2023 that's a motivating factor for people to transition.
Not in San Francisco.
That's
feel like
that's
be
my
easier as a
feeling as
woman.
well. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
okay.
But I don't know. I know that there's like more info and more. I know that the conversation for homosexual transsexuals has like evolved since then as well.
Right.
But I just haven't been keeping up with it in the same way that I've kept up with the AGP discussion. So yeah.
Okay.
Hi, you just listened to a clip from the Sitch and Adam show. If you like what you heard, you can listen to our live show right here on this channel on Sunday, starting at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. And if you want, you can super chat us. We read $20 and up super chats on the show and then do a follow-up stream on the following Tuesday where we read the rest of the unread super chats and interact with fans of the show. Subscribe to this channel right here to listen to the live show or to listen to more of our awesome clips.